Hey, Bob, what are we going to do today?
Kevin, I think we're going to talk about new technology. Is it actually new technology or is it old technology that's just got some new window dressing? And we're probably going to wander and talk about a bunch of other crap as well. So I'm Bob from the Bob and Kevin Show, and that guy over there that you can't see is Kevin. Say hey, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
I knew you were going to do that again. That's going to be the new thing. So I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of kick this thing off because I feel like you have a lot more information and I'm going to just be providing color commentary for this episode.
All right. Thank you for the perfect segue, Bob. So really today, let's start by setting the table. So, growing up, a kid born in the 70s, you kind of see technology as a kid and you're wowed by it and you grow up and you're like, oh, this is cool and this is going to change my life. And then certain technology actually gets reintroduced more than once. And you're kind of like, wait, what? Wait a second. We already had that. You can't call this new tech again.
Glitch in the matrix.
And for me, the classic example is 3D. So like 3D glasses. So as a kid, you start out with like the red and the blue, paper glasses, and you got the book, you open it up and it's got like the red or the blue, and you can only see through the color, with the glasses on. That's like, oh, that's cool. It's kind of like a 3D, but not, I don't even know what that's even called. But then we had 3D movies, and that actually started before I was even born. I think that's like a 1960s thing.
I was going to say maybe even the early 60s. We'd have to have the fact checkers look that up, but it's pretty old.
And fast forward to, somewhere in the 2000s where I purchased a high-def TV that came with 3D glasses because they said, oh, well, you're going to want, this is the salesperson, you're going to want the one with 3D enabled because we're going to have all this 3D content and it's going to be great. So I have a really high-end HD TV with 3D glasses, and I've never, ever, ever seen any content for it.
Didn't there used to be a 3D channel, but I bet you it still doesn't exist.
I'm betting if it did exist, it was 18 and over content, if you know what I'm saying. So,
bow wow.
So let's parlay that kind of thought, the 3D glasses part, into technology, because we like to talk about technology. It seems like when I look at advertising and marketing, Twitter, social media, that what is old is somehow new again. And when I kind of look at the details, at least at face value, I'm looking at this and going, God, we've already had this before. So from a high level perspective, the accused technologies are going to be machine learning, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, and a little sprinkling of blockchain. And I will try to keep tabs, make sure we go through them all. So high level, Bob, is this new technology, those that I just mentioned, or is it old technology with a new marketing team that came in and said, let's repackage this?
I'm going to go with B for most of them, but I'm very curious of how the conversation is going to go with a couple of those elements.
So let me prejudice the jury even further, if you don't mind. So if we look at artificial intelligence, we can say, yeah, I see a lot of advertisements, but I would counter that artificial intelligence has been around since, I don't know, from my perspective, it's a gaming thing where you play Super Nintendo or even NES or even the Atari 2600, where you have the bad guy and he's throwing punches at you. Remember like the old Atari boxing game you ever played?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I control the one player, but the computer controls the other player, and it knows how to kind of duck and dodge, and it has basically an algorithm. That is, in a most basic form, a form of artificial intelligence. However, it is algorithm-based. So there's Exhibit A for that. Exhibit B is machine learning.
Let's go back to this artificial intelligence, the old version of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Are you planning a further unpacking level, or can we just jump in with that one?
You know what? Yeah, you're right. Let's try the technologies one at a time, Your Honor.
Okay. So we're going to start with quote unquote AI.
Correct.
All right. So you had mentioned the boxing game, and even like I was thinking like that handheld football game where the defenders they followed a pattern.
Right.
So the difference between this old AI or the distinguishing facet for this old AI for me is that it didn't evolve. Like the patterns were the patterns. So pretty much every game, even if it was opponent based, you could figure out the punch sequence to knock out, Glass Jaw Joe or whatever, from that game, Punch Out.
Mike Tyson's Punch Out, baby.
Yes. So you could figure out the sequences, and just like that handheld football game from ColecoVision or whatever it was, you could figure out the sequence to get to the sideline and just left arrow it or right arrow it all the way down. So I think one of the challenges is the word intelligence, because if you think about people and intelligence, there's infinite levels of intelligence. So there's some people that just follow the pattern and you can figure out the pattern and get around them. And then there's people who adapt and learn with the patterns. So that would be more like a newer form of AI. But
right. So I would posit to you, Mr. Beatty Bar, that we've gotten more sophisticated in our AI, but under the covers, if you look at it, it's really just an algorithm. An algorithm is something that every programmer does on a day-to-day basis. Follow these steps and you will get to the path of righteousness, or at least you'll get the right output, one of the two. So now I played a game called StarCraft in the late 90s from Blizzard, and you could be the Protoss, the Terrans, or the Zerg. And each one has a distinctive personality, if you will, on how to play them. It's just like Tyson's Punch Out. Depending on who you're fighting, you had to know their strengths, their weaknesses, how to duck, how to dodge. But it got a lot more sophisticated. And if we play that out to year 2018, my question for you is, or statement first. Statement is I'm sure we've gotten more sophisticated in our algorithms, but have we actually made any sort of leaps into something that would qualify as, oh my gosh, this is great new, we have to market this as something different?
Well, no, I think that the database of pre-programmed options, because of storage, memory, efficiencies of coding practices, those kind of things, make it possible for there to be more pre-coded sequences that the computer can go through. I think the biggest test point would be if I face you in a video game and you're the computer controlled bot, the AI bot, and if I use a certain sequence the first time and the same sequence again to defeat you the second time, the true test would be as if there was data being collected and stored that then changed that character's potential for movement to not get suckered by the same sequence the third time. Does that exist?
Now would be a good time to differentiate or delineate the difference between AI and machine learning.
Yes, I need that.
AI is just simple algorithms. Think of it as if then else switch statements, whereas machine learning is statistical analysis. It is learning what worked and what didn't work. So I think that's more what you're looking for, is more of a machine learning. So
does marketing screw up AI? Like when we're talking about Sophia, the robot, she doesn't refer to herself, or the marketing doesn't refer to her as machine learning. It refers to her as artificial intelligence.
Which, if that's the case and you go by the strict definition, she is just if then else statements. So you're familiar with a decision tree, right? Where start here, go left. Is your favorite color blue? Okay, go this way. Is your and so on and so forth. So these decision trees are essentially codified, and that's what, to me, artificial intelligence is. It's simply a decision tree. Now you can make these decision trees sophisticated as you want, but at the end of the day, these decision trees are the only possible outcomes possible for AI.
So when we talk about machine learning, then it can weigh data collection and experience to possibly take that decision tree and modify a branch?
Yeah, I'm familiar with
add a branch.
I'm familiar with a scatter chart. So think of a two-dimensional chart. You got your X and Y, and let's try to do something. What happened? Okay, chart the result here. Let's try to do it again. Chart the result, and you can see where you can get the collection of results kind of coalesce in one area. You'll have your edge cases, but machine learning will look at that and go, well, you know what? There's a good chance that this is the right answer. So before we get to more into machine learning, because I think it's a good segue, you asked me a question about marketing. Are we marketing wrong? And I think they are, but they want it to be marketed wrong. Why do I say that? So
that's a damn good question. Why do you say that?
Thank you for asking. Because a lot of people, when they hear AI, they immediately go to science fiction and think of sentient robots that may or may not take over the world. Or they may be Data from Star Trek Next Generation, where, he's trying to discover his own humanity. And I think if we put artificial intelligence into Sophia and personify it, all the developers know damn full well that it'll never be more than an algorithm or paired with machine learning. It will never be conscious. It will never be alive. But the cardinal rule is we don't tell anyone that. We don't acknowledge that elephant in the room, because that it's like seeing how the magic trick works. And as long as you believe in the magic trick, the coin actually reappeared from behind your ear, Bob, then you're more interested. That's more tittillating from a marketing perspective. Because if I came at you and just said, we have the best algorithms in the entire universe, or we have amazing artificial intelligence, which one are you more interested in?
Right. So it is apparently a sexier term, but it's being inaccurately applied, I think, in some cases. First of all, pause for anybody who's first time listening to the show. I'm a huge fan of Sophia the robot. You should look her up online. I actually do think she identifies as female, which is interesting. But anyway, so there's all kinds of stuff going on there. But she's marketed as artificial intelligence. But if you read into, her history, her quote unquote birth, that kind of thing, she is designed to collect information and apparently learn from those experiences. So she references herself as still being like a toddler.
So it's funny you mentioned that she identifies herself as female, which is great. You can identify as any gender you want. But does she identify as that, or was she programmed to do that?
That's a damn good question. And I don't know if we have access privileges to get that answer, because that might be seeing behind the curtain and maybe it is all a sham.
Is Sophia open source? I don't think so, right?
No, that is proprietary Hanson Robotics technology.
All right. So, Bob, during our show prep, I came across a gentleman from Berkeley, California, I believe.
A couple smart people go there.
Yeah. Let's see. His name is John Searly. I'm totally messing that up, I'm sure. Actually, he was born in Denver, Colorado. He's a philosopher, but he has a very interesting thought experiment called the Chinese room. And since he's not a computer scientist, some computer scientists just immediately dismiss this. But I'll try to get through the gist of what the Chinese room thought experiment is. So supposing you created a algorithm that could understand the Chinese language, and it could pass the Turing test, meaning a human Chinese speaker would not be able to tell if it was real or not. That means you passed the Turing test. If a human being actually replicated the steps, the algorithm, let's say, Bob, you went to a room and you were able to process the Chinese language through a series of steps and then hand the message back, and that same human Chinese speaker couldn't tell whether or not you were a native Chinese speaker or not, you would also pass the Turing test, and you would also convince this native Chinese speaker that, hey, you must know Chinese. But you and I both know, no, actually you don't. All you're doing is you're following a series of steps. You have no idea what the message is saying because you don't truly understand it. You can only mimic or simulate something that's happening. So, go. Yep.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't want you to jump off of that one so quickly yet. So, but isn't that basically like if I did that, ran through the steps enough times, after enough iterations, I could say, I could almost predict what the answers are going to be because I'm starting to learn how to connect the pieces of the puzzle to give the output that's required, much like a child would learn.
Yes, you would actually, in fact, I would agree that eventually you would know exactly, given this input, what the output will be, but you will still have no idea what it says in English.
Okay.
And that's the thought experiment.
Right. So put yourself in the mind of an infant.
Yes.
Has no concept of language at birth.
Yes.
Basically, that child does the Chinese room experiment and they test output based on the input in the programming that they're given. So you start with, dad, mama, point, view, repeat, mimic. It takes them a while to connect that, but they do connect it. And and that continues all the way up through even to where we are now. We're always testing input that we're given. We're told, hey, this is how you do XYZ. You follow steps XYZ. Oh, yeah, it worked out, but I wouldn't be able to do that on my own and wouldn't know exactly when to apply it. But you do it 35 times, all of a sudden you know when to apply it, and then you know it.
All right. So to reiterate, if the input was a research paper of 100 characters and we processed it and we handed it back, we would still never know the meaning of the words. We could organize it, but we'd still never know the meaning because there's no positive feedback. So the infant gets positive feedback. Dada, he sees dada, and there is a affirmation. You will get no affirmation ever that the characters you're looking at have particular meaning. You will just look at them and go, they go in a particular order, and that's all I understand.
But that's a single program. So that single program is neither artificial nor intelligent. It's rote.
But that is the definition of artificial intelligence: an algorithm, a series of steps, period, end statement.
Okay, so then I'm more of a fan of, once again, artificial intelligence possibly being misapplied to things that are actually, or does this not exist? Do we not have any technology at this point that actually can take input in response, get things wrong, then through repeated attempts, get them right?
So we do actually, and that's going to be more in the machine learning side of things, because you can actually introduce, you can have supervised and unsupervised machine learning, and you can give positive feedback, you can give negative feedback, and you can. So one thing to note,
I'm done with artificial intelligence then, because that's basically glorified Pong. So first victim, it's just repackaged crap.
So and to be clear, who is the gatekeeper on who decides what's AI and what's machine? Where because the line sometimes butts up against with machine learning, but what I think marketers do, they kind of use AI as the top term and just say all that computer smarty stuff, those assistants, that's all AI, and to keep the public, because the public doesn't want to. My grandma doesn't want to say, hey, this cool machine learning. I mean, she probably doesn't even want to say artificial intelligence, but she might get AI over machine learning.
Robot.
So I'll give them a bit of a credit that, okay, they're using AI like a catch-all term.
Right.
But in general, I think AI and how it's pitched is a bit snake oily, and it's marketing and it's repackaging, like you said, an algorithm.
It's more complex decision trees. Same premise as the boxers in Mike Tyson Punch-Out, but more complex.
Okay. So we've talked AI and we've flirted with machine learning. So let's actually go all in on machine learning. So definition, according to Wikipedia here, is a subset of AI, which the computer science uses statistical techniques to give computers the ability to learn. And so this is where I'm going to say, sounds cool, sign me up. But then if you think about it a little more, wait a second. All we're doing is statistical analysis, and this has been around since, the early 20s, or actually probably hundreds of years, right? Given this, it's a mathematic.
Did they call it predictive technologies before they called it machine learning? Because that seems more along the statistical analysis, the predictive.
I wouldn't bet against you, but I don't really know that.
It just feels like that.
But here we have, scatter charts and feedback mechanisms and things like that. Now, machine learning even gets one layer deeper. It's called deep learning, and that's where neural networks are brought in, and data from Star Trek had a neural network, and all that is basically even more computationally intensive decision trees and statistical analysis. The problem with deep learning is it's actually completely impractical with today's technology because it's so compute intensive. So the big thing that irks me about machine learning is if I have a picture of a hamburger and we want to know, hey, computer, tell me what I'm looking at. And it gives you like a 96% probability that it's a hamburger. And we all go, that's awesome. But what the fuck's the other 4% is what I gotta say. It thinks it's a volcano. It thinks it's, something weird. And when it comes to that sort of thing, if we like overlay that on humans, I can get a kid wouldn't get that right, but young kid, but starting at like 5 or 4, or shoot, my 3-year-old would get that right, all the way up through adulthood, it's 100%. And I think if we
right, and this is where it gets really sketchy though, is because you would never pay a 3-year-old who might hit a 96% on is it a hamburger. You would never pay that 3-year-old to tell you if it was a hamburger, but yet there's companies selling that exact technology to wire into your products.
Exactly.
And it's got 96% accuracy.
Now, I've seen applications of this, like you wouldn't want a giant phallus as a profile image. So I get the practical application, but does it get it 100% right all the time? I'm curious. That's a really weird curiosity, but now I want to know.
It's not going to get it right 100% of the time because it sounds like this technology, the deep or the machine learning, is still too young. The data sets aren't big enough yet.
And so let's say a company or even a government goes all in on machine learning. Guys, we're going to create these autonomous drones and we're going to train them to know what a bad guy is, what a civilian is, what a woman, what a child, what an enemy combatant is, and it will be very good. And you and I know that, well, it's never going to be 100%. And then they may defend it and say, well, the GI on the ground can, sometimes is wrong to say that too. But here's what is also very easy to do in a machine learning situation. You can also train it to do the opposite of what you want. Instead of taking out enemy combatants, take out women, children, soft targets. And you can do so by just infecting their data store.
Right.
Because their scatter charts now say, instead of making a decision over here, we're going to just poison your data. And now your entire arsenal squadron of autonomous bots have now turned against the master, so to speak.
Now, I could also argue that can actually be done with people as well. You can reorganize their scatter charts and program them to find the other, or that somebody that's not the other is the other. So maybe it's
that's
more
called isn't that called Fox News, CNN, MSNBC? Isn't that the vehicle for that?
Right. But I mean, we kind of had some offline conversations about how this isn't really possible because it won't really be like people. It won't be like learning like that kind of intelligence, but it kind of almost mirrors it, doesn't it?
It does, in a really Black Mirror sort of way, morals and ethics and all that. Part of the thought experiment with the Chinese room and John Searle, he supposed or posits that, and I believe this too, we can come up with the most fancy algorithms, the most fancy deep learning, machine learning out there, but at the end of the day, it does not understand what it's doing. All it is looking and making statistical analysis. There is no morals, ethics, and all of that. So it's like we can get really super close, but we can never cross the gap into real Sophia can never really identify her own gender other than being told what it is, in my opinion.
So if that machine says it feels like it has all the qualities given the data that she's collected or that machine has collected, that machine is not capable of saying that they've decided that they identify as a woman.
Well, if we overlay that on real humans, what decides our gender biologically? It's your XY chromosome, X chromosome.
You're stepping in a giant slippery bucket of poop right now.
I'm flirting with some topics there, but
yes.
But the point is they're that's true, because do you believe that you are biologically created to be a gender, or do you get to pick on your own and yada yada yada? So I'm not going to weigh in on all that, but the point,
you should back away quickly.
Slowly. The point is Sophia is probably just reading an algorithm, or she's looking at she's been given machine learning. Hey, Sophia, your name's Sophia. That's a feminine name. So mark something down over here. Who gave her the name Sophia? Did she give herself the name?
No, because she was born and turned on, and the main programmer said, "Hello, Sophia." Like that
right. And she has a feminine look to her. So there's some intrinsic things, and you could argue that
you're still stepping in that slippery bucket of poop right now. But once again, though, I will argue that this is fodder, that it's really not as far off as we think, because it really is that whole example that you're outlining is following a real world development of a human being story.
Yeah. So there are some parallels here. And back to John Searle, he basically said, simulating is great, but that don't make you conscious. And I think what we are looking at with machine learning and artificial intelligence is a whole lot of simulating or emulating something that they are not, nor probably ever will be. So that's just my humble opinion. I know there's groups out there who are like, stop the automated weapons, and I think you can automate a lot of killing things without it having any sort of consciousness. But I also think we should never create automated weapons, because you can't give it a conscience. And everyone who has the ability to destroy life or things needs to have morals, ethics, and judgment. And that's a whole nother thing. So.
All right. So we're still on machine learning, though.
Yes.
So I feel like I'm leaning toward that. Well, see, for me, once again, the whole thing is can the data collected impact the outcome? So the hamburger, let's go back to the hamburger thing. Mm-hmm. If it looks at enough hamburgers, is that needle going to move, and not hamburgers, is that needle going to move from 96 to 98 because of experience and exposure?
I would think it's a diminishing return. At some point, no matter how many hamburgers you look at, there's so many permutations of a hamburger that you can't ever be right. And in fact, I don't know if a human can ever be 100% right, but I would be willing to bet cash money that a human will outdo machine learning every day.
Right. But do we have evidence that the machine learning can move that needle in a positive direction? Because if it can, then it does have learning and growth potential. So as you continue to expand, because think about it, it's going to be modularized. You don't learn to walk, talk, do math, write. You don't learn all that stuff at the same time. You learn it incrementally in steps. So, the hamburger thing could just be one visual module, and they start to collect these. And as computing gets better and storage gets better, it's not like you need an Amazon warehouse to be able to tell if it's a hamburger or not. It gets smaller, more scope.
Well, I think they do need an Amazon-sized data center. That's also one of the problems. You have
Right.
to look
Today
at
they do.
well, we're talking about today's technology.
Right.
Because today's technology, the topic of the day, is today's technology really yesterday's technology? And I think it still is in this case.
It's just
Because
getting smaller and faster. I mean, as far as that storage space technology goes, but I still think it's going to learn pieces at a time. And it's not just so Microsoft has some, intent engines, and Microsoft has some facial recognition. And I think they even have the, it will categorize an image for you. They've got those things.
Yep,
but
vision. Yep.
As that grows, as the library of things that it can identify grows, the technology should also grow to require less computing power and less storage to house more knowledge.
So I got to be careful how I word this. So I used to work at a company where they had some amazing technology. You would take a picture of a document and it would interpret everything on the document and put it into a database. It was fucking amazing, for lack of a better term, until I got to run the technology. You want to know how the technology worked, Bob?
You crank a lever and I don't know.
The person uploads said document and a human gets a notification that says, "Hey, you got a new document. Can you look at this and tell me what's on it?"
Oh, that's awesome.
There's a term for this. It's called a mechanical Turk, where basically we don't really know. So you're going to have to do this for us. So OCR technology is famous for this, where it can get kind of right. But a lot of times it gets confused, or it's too blurry, or it's too whatever. The human can overcome blurriness much easier than an OCR reader. So I think the to close the gap, is it a hamburger or not? Well, if I'm 96% sure, I could still be wrong. So how do I say anything with certainty unless I say, well, I think this is a hamburger, but you got to confirm it, Mr. Human? I mean, isn't that the only way?
Well, right. But eventually, I mean, there's going to be an acceptable, like 98.9% will be an acceptable, is it a hamburger? And so then they move on to another object.
So for recognizing a hamburger is great. So it's 98% sure that is an enemy combatant. Should I arm the Hellfire missiles, Bob?
I'm just not jumping so quickly to hamburger versus hamburglar. So yeah, I think obviously they're trying to develop all this stuff in parallel. Is that right? Probably not. But it is what it is.
So yeah, right.
I would say of the two, so we've got artificial intelligence and we said marketing, but really it's just the punch out guys with better decision trees.
Right.
Machine learning, I'm not willing to say that that's recycled old.
So we have
I don't know enough about it.
The financial industries for decades have been predicting the stock market trends. So I would look at the financial field and say, these guys and gals have been looking at data for years, but they've been doing it manually for a long time. Then the advent of digital storage, now we can do it, in mass scale. So, but that's late 80s, early 90s when we're doing this computerized, where we're predictive technology, your word. And now here it is, 2018. What huge leap have we made? And I'm not willing to say we've really evolved much, other than we have faster storage, processor, and bigger data centers, which really have nothing to do with machine language. That's kind of the boat, not the contents of the cargo.
But I feel like that's gone, and this actually might be a very interesting segue. It's gone from 2D to 3D because now we're not just looking at collections of numbers. We're able to analyze pixel data. We're able to analyze motion data. There's all kinds of deeper analysis that can be applied to a wider spectrum. So maybe that's just technology evolved. I guess it's probably just like AI at that time. So, wow. So we've identified two things that have actually been around for quite some time.
Yeah. So, somebody will be able to pick us apart and say, "Oh, you guys are missing this, missing that." I would love to hear, honestly, because I'm just listening to all the marketing speak and go, "Wow, this is cool technology. Cool. How do we use it?" Oh, well, really, it's just that same old, except now it's on Azure or AWS where you can just store your stuff there, and we'll help you. We'll charge you. Yeah, that's what we want.
So if you're listening and you think we're full of shit so far, hit us up on Twitter or, leave a comment on the site. Do it.
All right.
Did we beat the dead horse of machine learning? I bet you we could do a whole episode on machine learning.
We probably could, but let's move on to the next witness, or not witness, accused technology. The next accused technology is VR, virtual reality. Is it new, or is it just repackaged? So I was looking at this. There's some looseness on what exactly is virtual reality. And let's define it real quick. It's an interactive computer experience taking place within a simulated environment, mainly auditory and visual, but other types of feedback, like spraying water in your face.
Right,
haptic. So that is what virtual reality is. Now, let me present one of my exhibits here. I went to Universal Studios in 2005, and they have a ride, the Spider-Man ride. Have you ever been on the Spider-Man ride in Universal Studios, Florida?
I have not.
So it's basically you sit in a chair, they'll move you around, you kind of feel a little like thumping and G-forcing, and you get sprayed water, and you wear 3D glasses, and you're having this virtual reality sort of thing. Does that qualify? I'm not sure, because, a lot of times when I think of virtual reality, I think of Oculus Rift, which is 8-year-old technology. That goes, like a thing you wear on your face. And, I don't know. So blurring the lines, what would you consider? Would you consider the Spider-Man ride VR or just a thrill ride, and that doesn't count?
Wow, it's a really good... It's a good question, but I think it fits the definition. And I'm thinking back even like farther into like the 50s and 60s, where they had the movie theaters with the rumble seats and the shock you from underneath, and someone would spray water from the front of the theater. I would say that's probably the earliest virtual reality. In like, what about Second Life? Does Second Life count for something like that? Did you ever play Second Life?
I think I remember it, but that was just like an online game.
Immersive 3-dimensional world where you had a 3D avatar, and you weren't, it was still third person.
Okay. So I was going to ask you,
it was supposed to mimic reality. And I think it was marketed as a virtual world.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because in the 1990s, we had the Sega Saturn, another game reference. And a lot of those games were like Virtua Fighter, Virtua this, and, they prefixed it with Virtua because I imagine, because it was 3D graphics, and, Virtual Fighter. And so I think those count. Those are, I could definitely see somebody say, "Oh, wait a second, guys, now you're really, going out there." But even like 1980s, remember the old Star Wars arcade? It was like this, like just line drawings, and you're like going in the trench,
right. It's supposed to look like you were going in 3 dimensions. Yeah.
Right. So I think all that counts. I mean, I'm even looking on Wikipedia, Viewmaster. They're counting Viewmaster as virtual reality. And who didn't have a Viewmaster, or at least access to one, in the 80s? I mean, come on, right?
I still looked at mine when I was well into my teens because I thought it was just so badass.
So I think everyone wants an experience where you can put on a VR goggles, and like Oculus Rift. So that does exist, but that was invented in 2010. That's 8-year-old technology.
Have you tried one?
I have not. Have you?
I get nauseous.
I just don't do well.
So it must be pretty good.
And that's great, but is there any mass market appeal? And have we, in 2018, have we actually done anything with it practically? Question for you. What's the practical application of VR, and why should I be excited about it?
I have seen and heard that in medical fields or other precision manipulation fields, that they utilize VR for skills practice, for mission prep, because they can create the environment and kind of walk through a series of movements to get familiarized with the place that you've never been, those kind of things. So I think that's, probably lowest on the totem pole of the three things we've talked about for practical business application, but also lowest on the totem pole for practical entertainment as well.
Yeah, so there's a local agency who will be willing to take your money, Bob, and develop a VR app. I just don't know exactly what the hell the practical application of that would be. So again, it's like all sizzle and no real savory flavor to go. No lasting. This was worth it. It just seems all sizzle. So I'm looking at VR and going, yeah, neat, but this is just the modern version of 3D glasses. So maybe that's the iteration, but it's already 10-year-old or 8-year-old technology. I mean, what have we had since Oculus Rift? Oh, by the way, Facebook bought it for $2 billion in 2014. So shows what I know, right?
What is that one that I was telling you about that just recently launched there and everyone was starting to think it was vaporware? Oh, it's another VR headset. I can't think of the name of it though. We covered it a little bit on our our CES. MindSpring. No.
Yeah, I don't remember the name, and that's not good for marketing.
No, it's not. But I think they did actually just release a version of the headset, and apparently it's pretty good. But
so
it's not prime time yet. It's totally not prime time yet.
So VR, in my opinion, is a novelty technology. It's nothing for me to get excited. So, Your Honor, I would like to go ahead and rest my case on VR.
Convicted. It's old. It's just recycled 3D.
So the sister to virtual reality will be augmented reality. And here I might actually come around and say, this might actually be something that we were making progress on potentially, and there's a lot of practical application. So let's define it real quick if I can.
Okay. Yep. Do your definition.
Augmented reality is an interactive experience, a real-world environment whose elements are augmented by computer-generated perceptual information, sometimes across multiple sensory modalities, including visual, auditory, haptic, a word I can't say, and olfactory, so smells. All right, go, Bob.
So my question was, does augmented reality actually utilize elements of machine learning, because it actually does some calculations based on the visual image of the environment to overlay the augmentation, correct?
That's a great question. So yeah, I want to preface this with, I know nothing about development of AR. I only know user side. So that's a good point, because Pokemon Go, do you remember the phrase from 2 years ago? And I don't even know where it's at now. So basically, you could be walking around and chasing a Pokemon and get hit by a car all in the same, thing. Breath.
And that is awful reality, not just augmented.
And that was a hell of a game. I even downloaded it to try it out, see what it was. Of course,
Heck yeah.
God, I'm too old for this, and I removed it off my phone. But so that's one example. But the example that I think is just like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, is buying furniture and you can see it in your room. If you had a spot, you're like, hey, I want this couch. How would it look like in this room? So you put your phone up there and say, this couch, this color, hold it right there. And it would like snap to the room and be like, I think that is one of the best examples of practical AR uses.
I was going to say, do you think AR, even though we're just tip of the iceberg with the conversation on it, right out the gate, much more practical application than the discussions we had on VR?
Yes, but researching AR a little bit lets you know that it's actually 60-year-old technology, if you can believe it. At least it's got its roots back there.
Did not know that. Enlighten me, good sir.
So the first sort of example of AR is a heads-up display on a fighter jet.
Oh yeah.
And so while most people will go like, no, that doesn't count, it totally counts. And I even had a car at one point that projected the speed on my windshield. So I could look through it and not have to look down. And that's also AR. So it actually started 50 years ago with that. And then I'm pretty sure you've heard of a little thing called Google Glass, right?
Yep.
Something that I don't have they ever actually sold that, or is it just one of those like status symbols for nerds in Silicon Valley? What
I don't know if you could ever actually purchase the headset.
So that's a cool one. Another AR thing that's been around forever. Have you ever been to a Lego store and held a box up to the camera and it like shows the set built right on top of the box?
I've heard about that one. I've not seen that one firsthand.
Next time you're at a Lego store, check it out because it's really kind of cool. So my kids, we went to Disney World and went to the Lego store. Duh. But my youngest daughter held up a box of the camera and it shows exactly what it looks like built on top of the box. So it can actually, it does what you're saying. It recognizes which set it is and it shows the built version. And I think that's another cool use of AR. So if I were to look at AR and say, have we made any advancements? I would actually say, yes, we have, from the heads up display days from to now. But the Lego thing has been around for quite some time. I don't know the exact origins of that. But I have seen like Wayfair app, Lowe's, Home Depot, they are all doing augmented reality now. And I think that's really starting to catch on where, hey, we've got an actual practical use for technology here. And for me, kind of excited about that. Maybe one day I'll actually get to, I don't know, make one and figure out how it works.
Yeah, this one, I mean, again, it feels like it's old technology being repackaged, but I think the pattern that we're starting to see is that because of technological advances, we've actually been able to see an evolution. And this one seems to be the most practical at this point. But maybe it's just because the other ones are still too young to show the true potential.
Yeah. So any more thoughts, Your Honor, on augmented reality?
No, I like it.
All right, let's release augmented reality out on bail, and maybe we'll talk to it soon. Okay,
it's still going to come up on records when we're looking for things, though.
The next technology that stands accused is blockchain.
Is this our final one too? Isn't it?
It is.
Okay. This is what I know the least about.
Well, do you or don't you? So blockchain is the technology that underpins cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and things like that. However, it's not just for cryptocurrency. Blockchain, if I could define it here, is a growing list of records called blocks, which are linked using cryptography. So each block contains a hash of the previous block and a timestamp, blah, blah, blah. So long story short, you can cryptographically or scientifically or whatever you want to say, prove whether or not, yeah, thank you. Struggling there. Whether or not data has been tampered with. And one of the side effects is the ledger, if you will, can be public and it cannot be altered, except for a little thing called a 51% attack, which is kind of a side thing. So how old do you think blockchain is or isn't, Mr. Beatty Bar?
I haven't been able to quickly equate it with an underpinning technology, and that's probably the key. So enlighten me, good sir.
So blockchain, according to Wikipedia, was invented in 2008. So we're talking about a decade-old technology, and Bitcoin has been its most successful practical application, though that I say that very loosely because Bitcoin in general is a very controversial thing in of itself. So a lot of people these days, you look on Twitter, it's like blockchain, all the things. It's like people like just get infatuated with the technology and they apply it to everything. And I would say that since blockchain's been around for a decade and the best known use of it is Bitcoin and the shards of other cryptocurrencies, I would say that I'm not excited about blockchain because it really hasn't proven itself.
What were some of the lesser known wagons that blockchain has been hitched to?
Smart contracts. So Ethereum, which is a cryptocurrency, but you could not have it be a currency. So smart contracts is an interesting thing. So in the sense that I just went through a home selling, so the purchaser, they were going to get they got a mortgage, and there's so many things that have to happen before something else can happen. There's all these like if this then that's and wait for these guys and whatnot. So a smart contract allows you to actually codify all this, put it into a blockchain, and when more than one miners validate that something has happened, like, hey, an appraisal happened and here's what it appraised for, and they can all validate. Once you get thumbs up from a plurality or a majority, I'm not sure what it is, then we can say, okay, that happened. Now the next thing can happen. So maybe funds get released to somebody. So all of this can be codified into a smart contract. So it sounds really cool, but I don't know of anything that's actually like, big name. We're killing it, because most of these things are small fringe type companies, and at least from my perception.
And so it takes an extreme amount of computational energy to pull off blockchaining things too, right?
You betcha. In fact, so much so, you have to give incentive to the miners, which are the people who validate the blocks or the smart contracts. And you have to give them incentive, which is why we have cryptocurrency. So in exchange for your computational power, your electricity usage, we're going to give you some coins for successfully mining this information. And it's a competition. And so long as your cryptocurrency has value, you're going to have miners. When your cryptocurrency has low value, you're going to have less miners, and you're susceptible to the 51% attack, which is it's about consensus. So if we say, hey, you really did pay somebody money, that's only true if we get a consensus from the network. Because if 49% of the network says it didn't happen, but 51% said it did, then it happened. However, the converse is also true. If 51% said no, it didn't happen, even though it did happen, like maybe in person, the network wins and you lost. So we got to be careful with that.
So how does this work in a non-cryptocurrency environment? So let's say that I have a business need and I'm going to saddle up blockchain to make sure that every step along the way is certified, I guess. Would that be the right term? So then how would I use that internally? I mean, it'd be giant power consumption for very little return.
So it's about trust. If I told you, Bob, that I have a ledger and it's public and here it is, if you don't believe me, just go to the ledger. You can go there and you can see that, yes, it happened. And since everything's cryptographically signed, it's true. However, while you're sleeping, I could totally change all that. And then when you come back, we can say, no, look, it doesn't say that. So it only really works when there's more than one copy of the blockchain, so that it can be independently verified. So the whole idea is that it's decentralized. So if you're going somewhere and they say we have blockchain, but they're also the fox guarding the hen house, your trust level should go way down, because wait a second, you guys are the only ones guarding us here. You can change that at your whim. What makes blockchain great is if you can decentralize and publish this to all these places, and so long as at least 51% say this happened, then we can believe in that, because independent people doing this is way more trustworthy, especially if they all have a consensus, except for Chase Bank, who says, no, you owe me $1 million. So there's a bit of a problem there.
So I just don't really understand how it gets applied outside of that cryptographic world, though, or the cryptocurrency world. Sorry.
Well, I think that's perhaps why we see the proliferation and the coupling between cryptocurrency and blockchain, because maybe that is the only practical application. It's a get rich sort of scheme.
Well, right. Deal. So I'm thinking about it like, so all the large insurance agencies decide that they're going to create a collective and they're going to use blockchain for, I don't know, fill in the blank for a common function that they all do. But so they all have a a business interest, but there's competitive interests as well. So then how would that work?
I don't think they would collaborate. Simply.
Right. So then how can you apply blockchain technologies across another industry?
I see lots of flaws. Another big flaw is since the ledger contains every transaction ever, it's an ever growing list. So at some point, in order for you to have a copy of a successful ledger, you might have to download a 10 terabyte ledger, and it's only getting bigger. You can't download only part of it. You need the whole thing, every transaction ever, in order to prove what it says is actually true, because you got to start at the one side and make sure it checksums out to the other side.
Dude, that's got doomsday device written all over it.
Well, that's the problem that Bitcoin has. It doesn't scale, or didn't scale under their algorithms, and they have soft forks and hard forks, which turns into this Alice in Wonderland of, well, you may, if I'm a miner, I may reject your fork, and then we get these different, I don't know how it even works at that point. My thing with blockchain is, and we got kind of caught up in the blockchain fever, cryptocurrency fever, I don't know, last winter.
Late fall, yeah.
And that was cool. It was very insightful, but I think I came away with that going, you know what, this is a losing bet for people unless you were in early, and or you can speculate. You have money to speculate. But as far as can I just apply blockchain to something outside of cryptocurrency? The answer is yes. But I think the reality is, I don't think you would want to. You just don't need to, because for me, the decision tree, if I follow the theme here, is, do I want a centralized data store, or do I want a decentralized data store? Well, your competitive need would say, I need to centralize because this is proprietary private information.
Right.
If I am running a currency where this is a global use common good, then I need it decentralized so that there is no central bank, because we think the bank is evil. And so the only real practical application of blockchain is decentralized situations, which aren't a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of incentive to decentralize your stuff. So I think that's one of the problems.
FBI databases, I don't know.
Yeah, but see, the reason you want to decentralize is because you want to emote trust in the data. If it's the FBI wanted list database, it's not just a matter of replicating copies. It's because you put it at a blockchain because you want to make it trustworthy. Well, it's the FBI. Whatever they say, they got an arrest warrant. They got an arrest warrant. What is there to debate? When I give money from one person to the other, people try to scam the system, and it's anti-tampering is the selling point of blockchain. Nobody's going to tamper the FBI database.
Yet millions of dollars in Bitcoin go filtered all the time.
All right, Your Honor, I would like to close this technology with, I think blockchain is a whole lot of theoretical and bloated computational nonsense.
It's almost not old or new. It's just blah.
It just lacks practical application, in my opinion, and I'm sure the haters will just love to prove me wrong on that. So
they should probably use the word artificial intelligence more in association with blockchain, and maybe it will get more popular.
Perhaps. Okay, I want to move to maybe a post-trial appeal process, if you don't mind. So I was doing some of the Googles, and I said, you know what? I've heard whispers that Azure offers some APIs, and AWS as well. And so is it possible that maybe some twist on how they're handling things is actually going to change our opinion? So you have a potential, here's the appeal, and we can either uphold the convictions or we can overturn them. So I think I sent you a link earlier, some of Microsoft's offerings. So they have, I'll just read some of them if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
We have the one I think that's most popular is computer vision. That's basically your hamburger. Is this a hamburger or not a hamburger? They've got facial recognition. So It's really kind of creepy. If you click on that one, it basically tells you how much you have a number, how much facial hair they have, some sort of JSON response, facial attributes. It gives you the rectangle like you would see on like Facebook, or this is where their face is, confidence on their hair color, all these sorts of metrics. And that is cool. And I think that's fairly new, like in the last few years that you can do this. And I'm certain that something like this, which is really machine learning, didn't exist a few years ago. So I do feel like something like this is new and kind of exciting. What say you?
This is data collection for further machine learning at its finest. So they make this API available. People use it. They collect the data. Their machine gets smarter. There's an end game that's well beyond this.
Well, just a sheer law enforcement or Big Brother. I mean, you see countries like China, especially, they got closed circuit TV, and they can track who you are on the street. And so this is mind-blowingly cool yet really scary technology. However, stuff like this, when it's applied in this way, I really think this is kind of new and exciting. But they've got other offerings like the Azure Bot Service, conversational things. Those are cool, but we've had linguistical interpreters through computers for years. So I think there's a blend between what's new and old with as far as the Azure goes. What I didn't see on Azure, maybe I just can't find it, is they don't really offer an AR or VR API, but AWS does. And they've got something called Sumerian. I don't know if you saw this or not, but the way that this is pitched is it's the fastest, easy way to create VR, AR, and 3D experiences. So
I have heard about this one.
I'd never heard about it, but it gets me kind of excited that they have some sort of thing to do it. But without going deep in it, I mean, I don't know. So do you know anything about this?
Just that they've got basically you can build your own environments. That's
okay. So I'm looking at some of their images here. So basically, this is like a game level editor put into VR goggles or AR. So there's, again, it's kind of a blend of, well, we've been doing this for years in the gaming industry, but this is bringing it to maybe a different practicality where putting it in developers' hands who don't do gaming.
Well, Adobe has VR editing video software. So you can edit together VR scenes for use with headsets.
Okay. So I think these offerings are cool. I don't know if there's any non-Microsoft, non-AWS offerings. Are you familiar with any outside of these two?
No, not other than the video editing through Premiere that I was just talking about. But that's really not building an environment. That's just editing the videos.
So we have a 2-panel judge appeals process here. So if I were to look at some of these technologies, I would say AI, machine learning. AI is definitely still guilty. You're going to jail. I would say machine learning with some of this facial recognition, some other cool stuff exposed through these APIs gives me a little hope that we're actually doing some cool stuff nowadays. As far as VR goes, I think you're going to jail, buddy. You're just you need to think about what you need to do in the future and come back at a better technology. AR, I think, it was wrongly accused, probably. I think, even though it's got roots back in the day, I think, we've come a long way, and I think we're blazing a trail. Like I'm doing anything. The folks who are doing these things are doing great things, and blockchain needs to be sent to
the junk heap.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking of, like, I can't remember which Star Trek it is, but they're on like this ice planet, prison planet with the Klingons. Anyway, that's where it needs to go. Blockchain just need to go away, please. What say you?
I'm right there with you. I do think a lot of these technologies are probably going to be converging when the data collection phase gets mature enough. I think a lot of this stuff with the machine learning, with these, these APIs or these endpoints, these tools that are being offered up, are just part of a bigger data collection effort that are going to make the machine smarter. And then maybe that's part of what makes virtual reality a game changer eventually up the road, because there's been enough data collected about the physical world to recreate some really positive experiences in the virtual world. I don't know, but I do think that I think having gone through this conversation for an hour, I think there's a lot of overlap and convergence with most of the stuff that we've been talking about.
So if I could marry two technologies, it would be machine learning and AR. So I could take a room and it would design it for me, just a blank room. And it would say, okay, here's what it looks like as I hold up my smartphone. It'll be like, we can do that. We can do shiplap over here. We can do a cool hipster bar over here with some pendant lightings. I want it to tell me what it thinks the room's personality is, or at least give me choices. I think machine learning and AR could totally do that.
You get interviewed by an AI machine learning assistant. They walk you through your likes and dislikes. You say, the digital assistant says, "Hey, I'd like to take a picture of your room. Hold your phone up." Based on our conversation and based on your room, based on the things that we have available through these various vendors, here's what your room could look like.
Yes. And a totally unrelated note. So I listened to a recent podcast of .NET Rocks. I don't know if you listened to that one. Mads Christensen was on there. And nice. Unrelated to what Mads does for a living, they asked him a very fun thing, which was, what would you like your digital assistants to do that they don't do now? And I can't believe I've never thought of this. He wants a mode where it requires manners. Please and thank you, or Alexa won't do anything.
I find myself saying please and thank you all the time to my digital assistant. So that's very interesting.
It would be great because the kids, it's like, hey, they're talking to Alexa all the time, but Alexa should only, fulfill their wish. I feel like it's a genie sometimes if they use proper manners. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
It's coming. It'd be nice if she responded, when I did use kind language, if I used the please and thank yous. Oh, that was very nice.
It would be great if it was in that mode, you were cursing at her. I don't know if I've ever cursed at my assistant.
I have. She doesn't like it. She's like,
I would like it if she fought back a little bit.
Well, she goes, that was not very nice of you to say.
And whatever happened to our different voices? Remember the Super Bowl ad? New things coming.
That was the iHob. That was just another version of iHob.
Well, because I would like, to customize my assistant's voice. Maybe I want a male voice. That's another thing. They kind of hard-coded the word Alexa, which is feminine. Comes the Bob telling me I'm stepping in poop thing. I would like, when I first heard of the Echo device, I was thinking, oh, well, I'm going to pick my own name and I'm going to use the word Jarvis because that's the name of the onboard system for Iron Man's suit from all the, superhero movies. But I was sorely disappointed when
I think Echo is one of the names that you can use, though.
Echo, Amazon, and Alexa. Those three are the ones you can use. But I would like to be able to set a custom one, in my humble opinion.
Of course you would.
Of course I would. All right, Bob.
It'll come.
This is good stuff.
It was a great episode. And hopefully everybody that's still listening, give us that like, give us that subscribe, leave us some comments, 5-star ratings, the whole ball of wax. We'd love it all. Hit us up on Twitter, Bob and Kevin Show. And with that, I think I'm going to sign myself out. Bring the light.